back in Toronto after racing Ironman Mont Tremblant over the weekend. It was a weekend of firsts for me. I had my first interview with Bob Babbitt on Breakfast with Bob. I had first person request to take a photo with me. It was the first time that I was led out by a bike out on the run in a professional Ironman. But some of the firsts also weren't so positive. Like, it was the first time I was introduced to walking in an Ironman. It was the first time I had to visit the on-course medics. So those things weren't so much fun. Now, to go too into detail for my lead up to the race, I did some daily videos on my Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Mont Tremblant. So if you want to see what the lead up looks like, I'll put the links to the video in the description down below. In terms of a quick summary of how the race went, I was really happy with my swim. It was 58 minutes. I came out on Chad Holderbaum's feet. I've raced Chad 5 times previously, and I've always been well back of him, so it was a lot of confidence for me coming out on his feet, and I was only about 5 minutes down to the leaders. On the bike, the first loop of the bike went really well for me. I was around 248 to 250 watts for that first lap, so right where I wanted to be. I felt like I was good staying on top of my nutrition, and felt like I was riding pretty well from 90k to 120k. So the first third of my second loop, I felt pretty lousy with my lower back being really tight. It felt almost as though I've never ridden a TT bike before, just because it was just really difficult to stay in that aero position, and I had to get out of it quite a bit. But then from 120 to 180, I kind of had a second wind, and I was able to get back on my power. I was able to ride myself up into 4th place and was feeling really good coming off the bike. And then out on the run, back was still pretty stiff when I started the run, but it was able to loosen up over the first few kilometers. And by the time I hit the path at about 5k, I felt good, and was just settling into a pace anywhere from 420 to 430 a kilometer, and felt strong through my first lap of the run, which I did in I think it was an hour 31. Heading out onto the second lap, I went through a little bit of a rough patch, but it's not all that uncommon in an Ironman. At that point, I'd been out there about 7 hours, so you go through highs and lows, but this time I went through a low, and then I never really recovered from it. So by 25k mark, my pace started to slow, so my 430s became 440s, and then 450s, and then 5-minute kilometers. And things started to get a little bit rough for me. And as I started nearing the far turnaround on the course, the aid station right before the turnaround, I walked the aid station to try and get in as much as I could. And then when I tried to start getting going again, kind of things were getting a little bit dark for me. So when after I'd made the turn, my pace had slowed really considerably. Like, I was closer to 6-minute kilometers at that point, and one of the bike medics had come up to me, and he let me know that he was going to be following me, because a few people had mentioned that bib number 11, which was my bib, that I'd been weaving a little bit as I'd been jogging. So he followed me all the way to the next aid station, and then at that point he asked me to stop at the aid station, because he wanted to take some vital signs. So he took my heart rate, he took my blood pressure, my blood oxygen levels, and then when he was doing that, he noticed my skin was really, really cold. So he also checked me for hypothermia, which I found a little bit odd. Eventually, after I was there for about 10 or 15 minutes. They let me continue, providing I agreed to walk it in. So I ended up walking about the last 9k or so of the race. I mean, at that point, it's not as though my legs were really all that sore. Like, they really, my legs felt pretty good at that point in the run. It was just, it's hard to describe, but it just kind of seemed like the lights were turned off for me, and So since my legs were still working and the medics didn't think I would do any sort of long-term damage, there's no reason not to walk it in and not to finish. So it was it was a very long walk in, actually from 32 to 37 kilometers. So that included my stop at the on-course medical tent. I think it was about an hour and 10 minutes. So it was probably one of the longest. It's longest 5 kilometers I've ever walked. But I suppose I was glad to get to the finish line. It was a very disappointing result for me. I had very high hopes for this race. Leading into it, I thought I had a really good opportunity for a top 5 result there, and everything was going so well through 7 hours, and then very quickly that turned and things were no longer going so well. So it's hard for me to pinpoint what exactly caused me to have the problems. I tried to follow a very similar plan to what I did in Lake Placid. So my pacing was similar, my nutrition strategy was similar, but it could be that my nutrition was off a little bit, that the conditions on the day were a little bit different, that I just hadn't properly recovered from both Lake Placid and the other races that I've done since Lake Placid. So it's something that I'm going to have to do more investigating on. Not everything was bad. I did have some positives to take away from the race. So the first positive was my swim. I felt good, and coming out on Chad's feet was definitely a big confidence boost for me. Then also I had the 3rd fastest bike split. So generally, bike doesn't mean much if you end up walking or you have a poor run. But I can take some confidence in the fact that I felt really strong, even though I went through a bit of a down patch on the bike with my back being sore. I am really happy with where that bike split put me, and gives me some confidence going into my next Ironman race. So the next Ironman I'm going to be racing is Ironman Louisville in 8 weeks' time. I'm going to have a couple weeks of recovery, really let myself really recharge over the next 2 weeks. In 3 weeks' time, I'm going to be at the Skechers Multisport Canada Lakeside Olympic distance race. And then the week after that, I'm going to be headed to Barrelman. So I'm really excited to be going back to Barrelman. It's an awesome course. The run goes right by Niagara Falls, so it's definitely a race that I'm looking forward to. If you have any questions, either about my race, about Ironman Mont Tremblant, or anything related to triathlon, feel free to either comment down below or send me an email. And until next time, happy training.
Oh, this you crazy mother.